Hi again, welcome back to another writing vlog. Today I want to talk about a few different things related to my writing. I will talk a little bit about some things that I've been doing for the brainstorming and outlining of my still work in progress. I have still been plugging away at the brainstorming and the outlining of this book. I'm still really dedicated to the book. I sat down with my husband the other day and was just talking, basically just letting out a torrent of words at him. But I was talking to him about how I've had so much trouble with writing recently, and part of me thinks, you know, maybe it could be related to the project, because I've had this happen before where I'm working on a project and I don't want to give it up, but at one point I kind of realized the project's kind of at a dead end and I need to pause that, work on something else, allow myself to have a bit of freedom, and maybe that will relight the creative fire in me. But I don't feel that with this project. It does not feel the same. I really want to work on this project. I constantly think about it. I still think this is the project I need to be working on right now. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that one and what I've been doing for that one. But I also wanted to start with something that I'm going to try to do. I've already started trying this. I can't say if it works or not because I haven't been doing it that long, but I'm going to. I'm gonna keep going because I love it so far. But I wanted to talk about it first because maybe this would help you as well if you're in a similar situation to me, or even if you're not and you're just looking for new ways of trying to constantly spark your creativity. Starting from the beginning, one of the things I've been struggling with is ideas. I used to have ideas all the time. I would write them down on my phone. I would write them down in any sort of document or note-taking device that I had around me. And I still have ideas from time to time, but it's a lot less, and they're usually less inspiring. They're not a full idea, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's just a scene. Like one time I saw, when I was still living in Paris, I saw this girl who was dressed in like gothic sort of clothing. My first thought was like Billie Eilish, and she was drinking an orange spritz. And I just thought it was so, I don't know, there was something about that that just got my attention. And I just thought the contrast between the kind of dark, grungy sort of look, I might be exaggerating in my head, she probably wasn't dressed that like grungy, but in my head the contrast was there. I saw the bright orange, summery spritz, and I just thought it was so cool. And stuff like that will happen all the time, but I don't necessarily have a fully fledged sort of idea. In watching a bunch of videos from writers that I really like or I really respect, from like Brandon Sanderson and Lizelle Sambury to other people like me who are unpublished and just making videos, I've been watching so much content just trying to absorb other people's processes, other people's approaches to writing, and approaches just to creativity and ideas in general. And what I thought might be interesting to try for myself is to have an idea notebook. My first thought was that I would try and put an idea in it every single day. That hasn't happened yet. But I have 3 ideas so far over the course of a couple of weeks, because I really have not stuck to the everyday thing. I think I can attribute the actual inception of this idea from a podcast by Brandon Sanderson, where he and his podcast co-host Dan are talking about bad story ideas. My idea is that I'm gonna do the same thing, but it's not just bad story ideas. My goal is not to make a bad story idea. I'm just gonna put an idea, and it doesn't matter if the idea is good or bad or anything in between. In fact, in my notebook, this is the notebook I've chosen because it's a beautiful notebook I've had on my shelf. I didn't want to use it while I was in Paris because it just felt, not cliche, but I don't know, it just felt weird to be writing in a Paris notebook when I'm in Paris. Now I'm in New York, so I can write in my Paris notebook. And I have called it Idea a Day. Not every day, but you know, the good, the bad, the meh. And so far I have 3 ideas with that caveat of it doesn't matter how good or bad or in between it is. I'm hoping that it's gonna take a little bit of that pressure off. Every time I sit down to write, or if I'm thinking about an idea, I always wanna perfect it. I always want to really understand what it is I'm talking about. And sometimes that works, sometimes it's okay. Like, I'm a perfectionist, and of course if you're gonna actually write the story, you need to know those details. But sometimes I just need to be able to flip on that creative switch, see what happens, not worry too much if it makes sense, because again, even if I'm writing a book at that point, editing comes later and editing can fix it. And I need to be able to turn it off. Not always have it off, but just be able to turn it off when I need to turn that perfectionism and hypercriticality, I guess, is that a word? Off. I'm having a really good time with it. I know I've only done 3, like I said, so it's not a huge test sample yet, but it has been freeing to know that it doesn't really matter what I'm writing. I don't need to show anybody. I don't even need to do anything with it. It might be a terrible idea that I never touch the rest of my life and nobody ever wants, and I burn it someday. What matters is that I'm trying to access that part of my brain that just kind of goes off in a tangent, which happens all the time during the day for me. It just never happens in a story-like way, in a way that I feel is tangible. So this is really fun so far. This might be a fun way of seeing how story ideas come to me. If you just asked me right now and I told you like how I get my ideas, I would say it probably is usually concept and maybe setting, but usually concept is what happens first. Like a person exists in this situation and then this happens or something like this happens and they have to do something. As opposed to a setting, like it's a world where this happens or this doesn't happen or, you know, whatever. And I don't think usually I do character first. I think the characters come to me as it goes. I don't usually imagine here's a person with these traits or with this ability. That's not true actually, because a person with an ability is how some of my concepts start, but it's not really a character. I don't know. Long story short, I think this will be really interesting to see what comes to me first, because the idea is that these are completely out of nowhere, just a random story idea. Can be setting, can be concept, can be both. And so far of the three, I think two of them I would classify as being more concept. To be fair, one of the concepts is kind of character related, but it's not a character with traits or with a personality. It's something that they can do, because of course I write fantasy, so it's some ability that they have. So that's kind of more concept. And then the other one is setting. So it'll be really interesting over time as I come up with more and more to see where I start basically. And maybe one day I'll be able to answer that question a little more certainly about where my ideas start. I would love to know if you've ever done something like this, tried to write an idea down a day, or, you know, I think a lot of us writers keep a log somewhere, somehow, of our ideas. And I think it's a great idea to always write down any sort of even tiny little tangent you come up with. If you think it's a cool thing, write it down somewhere. Maybe you'll incorporate it into a new story or into an existing story someday. But have you ever tried to keep a log of, you know, day to day or week to week? Just throw something out there, and it doesn't matter if it's good or bad. What's really different for me is that usually I write down ideas as they come, and in this case, I think, oh, I need to update my idea notebook, and it doesn't matter if I have an idea in my head already. I sit down, I look around me, I think about things that I've done recently, maybe play some music, and I try and just think of something. Calling on that creativity instead of just, you know, reacting when it comes to you is a really good skill as a writer to have, and it's one that I'm working on. I have it sometimes and I don't have it other times, so it's definitely not as consistent as it needs to be. As far as brainstorming and outlining my current work in progress, hang on, I'm gonna grab a drink of water. Hydration, also very important. For this next book, I'm creating a world where gems are very important and are related to magic. I don't want to say too much, not just because of spoilers or something, but also because it's very possible I'm going to change a lot of things as I'm outlining and working on this. It's heavily related to gems. And for that, I have been doing a lot of geology studying. I've never been a science person that much. I enjoyed chemistry back in the day. Geology is something I have never studied, be it in school or on my own. It's never been something that's really interested me until I had this idea where I wanted to do something related to gemstones, and I thought I needed to understand the different categories of gemstones, the different associations with gemstones. I thought it was going to be like brushing up for a few hours or a couple of days, when in fact I have been reading off and on about gemstones and geology and how rocks and mountains work and everything for months. Not every day, but off and on for a very long time. I'm kind of making it my second personality right now. I could just get an overview of gemstones and learn the very basics of what I need to, but there's a lot of aspects to how they form, the minerals, things like that, the terms that I really want to understand, and it's not as straightforward as I thought it was going to be. Or maybe it's just because I don't have a really good teacher. If you're a geology expert, let me know in the comments below. Maybe we can chat. But it is complicated. Again, I don't need all of this for my book. It's not a book about geology. I just need to know the basics in order to create a fantasy world where I can change up some of the basics if I want to. If I want certain things about the science of gemstones to be different, or the science of the world to be different, I can do that. It's fantasy. Nobody really cares if you move things around here and there, if you kind of bend things to your fantasy rules, as long as it's still believable. But it's that believability that I really want, so I want it to be realistic enough and I want to have an understanding. This has been my best reference so far, in addition to a myriad of internet sources, but I wanted something physical. There's something about writing about gems that I just feel like I want something in my hands, even if it's not an actual gemstone. I probably will buy some. I'm avoiding crystals and stuff like that and like astrology because I'm not really into that and I don't want to have that in my story, but I'm also trying to be a little bit aware of some of the like associations that people who are into astrology might place on certain gems or crystals. But overall, the sort of symbology and meanings and stuff like that that you find in astrology, that's not what I'm about. I'm about the sort of geological aspects of the gemstones. So I have this Gemstones of the World book that I got. I have some tabs on some different pages where I'm kind of reading or exploring things. It has a lot of information. I'm gonna try and show you. This is very difficult with a hardback. Information on different cuts of gemstones, how, you know, they're found and mined and things like that. What I've been really focusing on is the different types of gemstones, how they're classified, the difference between like gems or things that are considered gems that are formed from minerals, which is most of them, versus things like amber or obsidian. And there's lots of different types of gems as well. I really don't want to just focus on, you know, diamond and the ones that kind of everybody knows. I want to really get a little bit more nerdy, because also I think an advantage that will have is if I'm talking about gems that are maybe not quite so commonly referenced in, I guess, pop culture and just everyday life for most people, then I can have a little bit more of that fantasy element while still basing it on, you know, science and realism for the most part. It's gonna have a lot to do with the characters as well, so I don't want to get too bogged down in all of this detail, and I know that some of it's gonna come about as I write the story, but I still want a believable plot. It is going to be somewhat of an adventure sort of plot with the characters really, really driving the action, not so much external forces, but you have a little bit of both. So that has been super exciting, but also very time consuming, as you can imagine. I will find myself just watching a YouTube video on geology instead of writing. Since starting the idea notebook though, I have had a couple of good brainstorming and outlining sessions. I do think that sitting down and forcing myself to have a little bit of a creative spark with that very small commitment that this idea notebook is, you know, sitting down for literally 5 minutes, I think it's helping me have a little bit more discipline with my writing. Another thing that has helped me with outlining is that I realized part of what was getting me stuck was because I was trying to outline both of my dual POVs. I'm gonna have a dual POV, one slightly more important than the other, or I guess more prominent than the other, but both, I guess, equally important. But I was trying to put them together as I was outlining. So chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and, you know, exchanging between the two characters and trying to imagine what it was going to be like to write the book. I've never done a dual POV though. And for those of you out there who have done dual or multiple POV, you might already be thinking this was a rookie mistake, but I've learned it now. Writing them side by side, well, not even side by side, but together as they would be read in a book, is very, very difficult. I will need to put them together because they overlap sometimes. So sometimes I'm gonna have to think of them in relation to each other. But when I'm actually still just trying to figure out what is going to happen in these different POVs and these different arcs, I can't do it side by side. In my document, so I use Evernote. I've talked about this a little bit before, maybe I will again one day, and I'm probably gonna use a different system at one point because it's not a perfect system. But I use an Evernote notebook and then notes within the notebook. And I usually just have an outline note for my first draft outline. I've created now 2 extra notes, outline, first POV, outline, second POV. I'm going to fill those out first to get an idea of the overall outline of that character. I have no idea how much depth I'm gonna put into each one of these before I then put it into the main outline, and then I'm gonna kind of figure out how to intersperse them so I can make sure that they mesh up when they need to mesh up, that the big character arc moments happen at the right time. But I think I need to really separate these 2 characters, figure out what I'm doing with both of them before I put them together. That's basically the gist of it. That is what I've been doing lately, how I've been approaching my writing and approaching looking for ideas and trying to spark that creativity a little bit more. Right now, for example, after having talked about my book and my ideas and what I've been working on so much, I'm feeling very pumped and very just positive, just really good about it. And that feeling right there is why I'm not giving up on this project, because I'm still getting that same passion for it that I know is what makes a project right for you, that you're feeling really good about it and passionate about it. Let me know in the comments what you're working on right now, what stage you're in. If you, like me, are in the kind of brainstorming and outlining phase, if you're drafting, if you're revising, if you're querying even, that would be really, really exciting. best of luck to everybody in the query trenches right now. I will hopefully be there again with my last story at one point, but I think I want to edit it a little bit more before I do. That's another vlog though. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you very soon in another writing vlog.